What's up, everyone, and welcome back. We are in our app view here, and we are almost ready to launch our app into the App Store. At the beginning of the course, we decided that we were going to launch our app for iPhone, iPad, and Mac Catalyst. Now, Mac Catalyst is going to run the iOS on Mac, which is basically our iPad app. So in this video, we're going to start setting up our app for iPad and also add a little bit of accessibility. Now, this is a realm where it is obviously important to support iPad and accessibility, but we need to remember as the engineer and as a business person that the number of people that are going to use our app on iPad is probably relatively very small compared to iPhone. There's just way more iPhones out there and people use their iPhones way more. Also, the number of people who use our app with accessibility is incredibly small compared to the total population. So these are things that are incredibly important for us to add, but they're not so important that I'm going to invest a ton of time in supporting them, at least not for my first version. The first version of my app needs to be getting the core iPhone build out to users and proving that that is a good use case. So that's what we've built so far. That's what we focused on when building. But now we're just going to run through and quickly support iPad. So it's not going to be perfect. We're not going to add like a special UX just for iPad, but we'll do enough just so we make sure that it's usable and it looks good. If our app is successful and we get a lot of iPad users, then we can start to invest in a full-fledged iPad UI. Just like we did with our analytics, we're just going to run down all the folders here and jump into each one and update them. In the app view, there actually is no UI here, so we are good to go. Let's jump to the category list view. Category list view, let's Option Command Enter to get the preview open. I'm going to switch to the mock build. Let's also get our iPad on the screen. So I'm going to go with an iPad Pro 13-inch. Generally, when I go and test iPads, I try to find the biggest iPad and test it on that. Because if you can support the biggest iPad, because if we're already supporting iPhone, and then we go to the biggest iPad, you can assume that basically everything else would fall between the iPhone and the largest iPad. So even though some of these have slightly different dimensions, the biggest one here is a iPad Pro 13-inch, and I'll just run with that for now. At the bottom here, let's go ahead and add our preview environment. And we'll add it to all of our previews. And then let's get the preview working and see if we need to do anything to support iPad on this screen. So, and out of the box, this actually looks pretty good. I'm going to leave that as is. It works, and that's all that I really care about for our purposes right now. No data, let's switch to the no data version, make sure that works. Good enough for me. Slow loading is just the progress view, and then error loading, let's switch to that. And that looks fine as well. Let's also do accessibility while we're here. I'm going to switch back to the iPhone 14. The main thing we're going to do for our accessibility is just supporting larger text. So down here, we can click this little grid here and click dynamic type variants. And this should give us all of the accessibility font sizes. Now, I will post a link below with full details of a bunch of videos that I put on YouTube for how to manage accessibility. There is much more than what we're going to cover right now in this video. But the main thing I care about is making sure that our largest font sizes look good. And I can see that down here. And this actually looks pretty good to me. So there's not much that we need to do here to support accessibility. Instead of doing all the font sizes, generally now, I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to just switch my iPhone to dynamic type large so that we just text the largest size. So if we can support the largest size, we can assume that everything smaller than the largest size would work as well. So largest size is looking good. Let's come down to the chats view. The chat view probably is going to need a little bit more work. Since we're on the iPhone preview, we'll start with the accessibility here. This looks pretty good as well. Actually, we're already supporting the larger font sizes. Honestly, so much of SwiftUI is just out of the box already supports resizable. It's so cool. I don't like how the date is going on to multiple lines. Let's find our date message, which is the timestamp view. And I'm just going to give that a line limit of 1. I'm going to give it a minimum font size of 0.3, so 30%. So it can scale down to 30%. So that should just put this onto one line here. Again, if you watch the videos in the link below, I did a whole thing on accessibility on YouTube with just full details on additional things that we can do to support this. This actually looks really good, and I'm going to leave it like that. Let's switch to our iPad, and let's turn off dynamic type for a second so that we can see the default iPad UI. And that looks good to me. Let's jump into our chats view. We'll start with the iPad since we have it up. All right, this looks actually great. Because we use the native list components, everything is just by default supporting iPad. It looks great. Let's switch now to our iPhone, and let's add our large accessibility font. Now we have our first real problem here. So let's start with these cells up here. And those are going to be our, let's come to the top. Let's look for our recents section. Then we have an image loader view and then text. So the text, let's make sure it stays on one line. We'll give it a line limit of 1, maybe a minimum scale factor of 0.3 as well. And let's give the image, let's give these a frame with a height of maybe 50. And let's see what that looks like. So this might force the images to be a little bit bigger than they are now. And then the font, I think, will shrink a little bit. Let's go more. Let's go a minimum of 90. That's too much. Minimum of 70. 60. And that looks decent. The minimum scale factor of the text is actually making the text look different font sizes. Let's just remove that. Maybe we'll force it all to be the full-sized text. That looks fine. Let's also now check out these rows here. So these are going to be the chat row cell view builder. When I go to this, the preview on the right is going to change. So what I'm going to do is click the pin up here. So we'll pin this preview as we change our screen here. So let's jump in and let's jump into the chat cell view. And this looks like the headline and the sub headline. I'm going to give the headline a line limit of 2, so it can go up to 2 lines. We'll give it a minimum scale factor, maybe 0.5. For the subheadline, let's make that a line limit of 1, less important, and we'll make it real small if needed, 0.3. I think that actually does look better. For the new, we don't need the new to be that big, so let's come here to the new badge. Let's give this a frame with a max width, 50, so that even if the text tries to scale up, the whole thing is limited to 50 pixels wide. That looks decent, but now let's also just scale down the text. So we can do a minimum scale factor of like 0.1. Let's give it a line limit of 1. I really don't care if the new scales down too much because it's much less relevant than the user actually being able to see the content in the cell. And that looks much better to me. This looks like a pretty usable screen to me. Now that we made some changes though, let's also just revert back to the default text just to make sure that everything still looks good in the regular UI. Looks good. Let's keep it moving. We'll go to the create account view. Create account view. Let's pull up our large dynamic type text. We are crashing, so we probably need to add our preview environment. How handy is this, guys, right? Preview environment. Literally one line of code fixes like all of our SwiftUI preview crashes. The amount of code we've written is insane, and we're not even done with the course. This looks pretty good, not super good though, because the create account view is going to pull up in a half screen. So if I were to limit this to maybe a frame with a max height of, let's say 400, it's going to look closer to that, I think, in the actual app. Let's push it down to the bottom of the screen just to kind of resemble what it's actually going to look like. And then let's come up here real quick. On the title, we'll give this a line limit of 1 and a minimum scale factor 0.5. Subtitle, let's do line limit of maybe 4 and same thing 0.5. See how that looks. That looks much better to me. I actually meant to put it to the bottom. This should be max height of infinity. All right. I think that's good enough for now. Let's switch to the iPad and just check this real quick. I'll turn off the dynamic type on the iPad. That looks pretty good, not amazing. Maybe we want to do a frame on the button with a max width, maybe like 500, and we'll do an alignment of leading. Sorry, I meant let's do the 500. And then after this, let's do a frame with a max width of infinity and alignment of leading so that it pushes to the left side of that frame. I think that will look a little better. Sometimes if your call to action button is like the full width of the iPad, it just looks a little weird to me. That looks, I guess, a little more natural. Maybe we do 400. Cool. 400, good enough. Let's not really care about it because it's such an edge case in our app. All right, let's switch to the create avatar screen. We'll do the iPad first. Preview is failing. Let's go ahead and pull in our preview environment. All right, this looks decent. I would rather have the save button up a little bigger. I definitely don't think that we need the image to be this big. Let's go down to where we have that image. So at the top here, we have our image section. Image section has text and then a circle. I guess the circle is just as big as it possibly could be. Let's give it a frame. Let's give it a max height of maybe 500. I think that will still be a pretty big image. Yeah, that looks good. Let's go maybe 400, a little bit smaller. And then I want to put it in the center of this area. So let's go ahead and frame. Let's also add a max width of infinity. Should put it right in the center. Lastly, on the call to action button down here, again, it's the full width of the device. Let's just give it maybe a frame with a max width of 500 so that it is most of the screen, but not the entire screen. I think it'll just look a little bit better. All right, but I want it to be the center, so we'll do another max width of infinity so that this is aligned 500 pixels in the middle of infinity. Cool, that's good enough for now. Let's switch to our iPhone. Let's add up our dynamic font of incredibly extra, 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 extra large. And let's make sure this looks good with large font as well. All right, name your avatar. Where is that? In our name section. Name your avatar. Let's give it a line limit of 1 and a minimum scale factor 0.3. Let's do that for all of our titles here, attributes. I'll do the same thing. And I think that's it. Player 1 looks pretty good to me. All right, name your avatar. It will be Joe. Joe will be is a man, alien. I don't really like that this is on 2 lines, but these pickers are really hard to work with. So we're just going to leave it like that for now. Generate image, that should be 1 line. Let's go to the generate image. Let's give that a line limit of 1 and a minimum scale factor 0.5 maybe. Let's scale it down even further, 0.2. That looks fine. This is like one example where if I really want to spend the time to customize, I might move the circle below here for devices that have larger font or something like that. But I just want to get this working and this looks good. Let's switch to our dev settings. We're not going to do because that's just for us anyway. Explore view is an important one. This is our home screen. On the explore view here, it looks like this cell, we might need to do some updates to the preview, to the subtitle. Let's pin the Explorer view. Let's jump down to our cell. That's going to be our featured section. In the hero cell view, I'll jump in here. Let's give the title a line limit of 1 and a minimum scale factor 0.3. I'll give the subtitle the same thing, but we'll do a line limit of maybe 2. I think that will work. For the categories cell, let's jump to the categories cell here, categories cell view. And we have text here. Let's give that a line limit of 1 and 0.3 as well. Let's let that load and see what it looks like. That looks good. Another example of like maybe if this was a really successful app and we had a lot of people using accessibility, I would change the gradient on this cell to like go up higher. I think the gradient's, it's low now compared to where the text is. Alpha and aliens following the park, these all work. It's not the greatest UI, but at least users with this accessibility can at least read and click on the cells. And that's all that really matters right now. Let's switch to the iPad. iPad Pro. I'll turn off accessibility fonts, see what this looks like on iPad. That looks great. We did a great job building this, honestly. Just native components with the right sizing, max widths, and things like that. Fits iPad by default. I love it. Let's jump to the onboarding views. So these should be pretty quick. Onboarding color view. I will unpin the explore view. I'm going to X out of all of the other tabs here. I think they're slowing down our preview generating. We're getting a crash. Let's go ahead and add in our dot preview environment, and I'll delete this app state here. This looks pretty good. I'm actually just going to leave it as is. I think that this works. It's perfect. The button's clickable. It's fine that the button is so big. And I guess while we're here, okay, this screen looks fine too. Onboarding completed view. Let's switch to the iPhone 14. Let's put on our large font. Make sure it works. Looks pretty good. Select the profile color. Let's just, where's that? Select a profile color. Let's give that a multi-line of center so that it's just center aligned. But other than that, this looks pretty good. Let's check that this screen looks perfect as well. Super simple, super readable. Onboarding intro view. We have some text here. We might have to resize it down a little bit. We'll see. Previews are crashing. Let's add our preview environment. The previews are crashing, by the way, because of the screen appear analytics. The screen appear analytics needs the log manager in the environment. That's all. All right, this is working. This is getting cut off though. Let's give this a minimum scale factor 0.5. Maybe. I'm not going to give it a line limit. I think maybe we can just let it resize and it'll be however many lines it needs to be. Looking good to me. Let's go ahead and switch to the iPad here and just make sure iPad looks good as well. And again, I will turn off dynamic type for the iPad. I'm sure the screen will look fine. There's not much going on here. That looks good enough to me. Let's switch to our profile screen, profile view. Check out the iPad. We already have our preview environment on here. These look good to me. Let's switch to our iPhone 14, add up our dynamic type. I think it's going to be fine. There's really not much text on this screen. We are almost done. My avatars, let's make that. Where is it? My avatars. Let's go line limit of 1 on here. Give it a minimum scale factor 0.5. That should be fine. Two lines is actually not bad, but whatever. Perfect. Let's jump to the root is not going to have anything. The routing is not going to have anything. Settings view we can do quick. This should be pretty simple because we're just using a native list again. Between writing good SwiftUI code and using native components, lots of things are basically ready to go out of the box. Settings, okay, let's go ahead and make some of these one line though. Let's go to our count section. Let's actually put on the entire list. We'll just do a line limit of 1 and a minimum scale factor 0.4. I think that'll just make everything crunch down and probably save us a little bit of time. All right, sign up, delete account, purchases, version number, created by Swiftful Thinking. Sweet, that looks good enough to me. Let's switch this to the iPad, which I'm sure will be fine. I'll turn off dynamic type, and I think after this, we're going to have, I think, one more screen, and then we are in the home stretch. That looks perfect. Let's switch. The tab bar doesn't have any screens, and last but not least, our welcome view. Let's pull in our preview environment, and let's let the preview load up real quick. That looks perfect to me. Maybe the continue button will make it a little bit smaller, so we have the get started. Let's give this the navigation link. We'll give a frame with a max width, maybe 500. Looks a little bit more user-friendly. And now lastly, let's switch to the iPhone and let's throw up our large dynamic type. And we saved probably the worst screen for last. All right, just go through it one at a time. Let's start with our title section here. That's already one line. Let's just make sure it stays on one line. So we'll give it a line limit of 1 and a minimum of 0.5. YouTube at Swiftful Thinking, I'll do the exact same thing. CTA buttons, get started, 1 line limit. Sure, let's just throw it on there, can't hurt. Same thing with this. Maybe we should have just put it on the entire VStack, but we're already working here. All right, terms of service as well as private policy, everything is a line limit of 1. Let's see what the UI looks like real quick. Already have an account is still not sizing down small enough. So let's go ahead and go to that. Already have Maybe we give this a line limit of 2. That looks fine to me, but actually now already having count is bigger than get started, and I don't like that. Let's give this a 1 and we'll let it resize smaller. 0.3. That looks better. Yeah. Get started is now our main thing to click. Again, not the coolest UI, but this is obviously a user who can barely see. So just getting it to be able to be working is the thing that we care about the most here. Let's turn that off. We've now done all of our screens. The last thing we're going to do in this video is just build it to a simulator real quick. I'm going to build the mock version to a simulator. I'll build it to an iPhone. And I'm noticing, again, the display name does not say mock. I don't know why that keeps reverting back. If somebody knows why that's happening, please let me know. Let's come into our project, go to our display name, and our display name again says AI chat. I don't know why this is happening. It's super annoying. This should say dev and this should say mock. Maybe it's getting overwritten by the project. It doesn't sound right to me. All right. I don't know. Let's go ahead and run it again. There must be something weird that I am just not catching of why that's happening. But anyway, let's get our mock running here. What I'm going to do is just open up settings on the simulator. Let's come down to the developer and let's switch to dark mode. We haven't really used our app in dark mode, but most of it should look fine out of the box. Here we go. Make sure it works. All right, these are working. Looks like some of these cells are supposed to have cell backgrounds, which it looks like now we're using this, the system background blends in. Maybe that's the default for the list, but I don't really like that. Let's try to customize the cell background in dark mode here. Let's go to the Explore view. Let's find our popular section, custom list cell, and we have a background here of system background. So that's why we're using the system background, which in dark mode is black and just matches the background here. So this is like a weird situation to me where in light mode, the system background does not match the list background, but in dark mode, the system background matches the list for background. Don't ask me why Apple did that. That is super strange to me. Let's go ahead and just fix it though. So what we actually want to do here, let's get the preview working. All right, we have our cells. Let's switch this to dark mode quick. And then there is a environment variable we can pull in at environment, the color scheme. We'll make this a private variable called color scheme. And then the color scheme will tell us if the user is currently in light or dark mode. So let's come down here and we'll say if color scheme is equal to dark mode, let's go ahead and use the color from UI color. And now instead of using the system background, we'll use the secondary system background. We'll do otherwise system background. So this is super annoying that Apple has like switched. Light mode, the list background is secondary system and we can use this as an alternate color. But in dark mode, the list background is this. And so we'll use this as an alternate color. Don't ask me why Apple has done that. I don't want to keep rewriting this though. So let's go ahead and make an extension of color scheme. Let's create our own variable called background primary. This will be our background primary. And then in here, we'll do what we just did here. Let's cut this, paste it here. So if self is equal to dark, we'll put that, otherwise that. So now I should be able to call color scheme dot background primary. While we're here, let's also do the inverse, right? So the inverse of this would be a background secondary color in which in dark mode, we'll use the actual system background. And then in light mode, we'll use the secondary system background. Don't ask me why Apple swapped these. I think it was definitely a bad decision, whoever made that decision. Let's move this to an extension file. So let's come here to our extensions. We'll right click, create a new empty file. This will be our color scheme plus ext. I'll cut this code, put it into our color scheme. Let's go ahead and import Swift UI at the top. All right, let's see. Also in our chats view, we want the same thing on these cells. So in our chats view, we have chat row cell view builder. In here we have chat row cell view. And let's pull in our @environment, color scheme, private var color scheme. And now we should have a background on these cells. Here we'll do color scheme dot background primary. And if I jump into this screen, these cells are reused from the same cells as these, so I think that will work fine. But in here, I want these cells to now also change. Let's go to our settings view. Let's pull up the preview real quick. All right, so each of these cells have custom row formatting. And so inside this extension, we have the background color, but we can't access the environment from this extension. So we need to actually make this an official view modifier. Let's make a file private struct called row formatting view modifier. Conform to view modifier. We'll add in our body here, add in the content. So now let's actually officially move all of these into here. So we can pull in our @environment color scheme, private var color scheme. And now we should be able to use our color scheme.background primary. The view modifier row formatting we'll call self with a modifier for the row formatting view modifier. Let's see, private violation, prefer private. All right, we can just make this private. That's fine. So let the preview load real quick. That looks much better. Let's go ahead and build and run it to a simulator and just check out that those changes worked. And then we'll end the video here. All right, yes, these cells look so much better with that alternate background now. That looks great. These cells look good. These cells look good. And this looks way better. Great. All right, let's end the video there. So again, iPad accessibility, these are things that are secondary. They're not the core focus of our V1, our MVP. I would not spend a ton of time supporting iPad. If something like iPad is going to take you a ton of time to get up and running, I would honestly remove it from my V1. Most of the apps that I put in the App Store, I actually remove iPad and Mac and then add them later, because if it's going to take you a lot of time, it's probably mostly a waste of time. The core value of your app for most apps is an iPhone. And that's the experience that I want to focus on and make sure it's good and make sure people are loving that before I spend time on the accessory use cases. So before I spend time on use cases where there are just not going to be that many users. Even if you love iPad, chances are you're going to have way more users just on iPhone. Accessibility is also something that is crucially important. Technically, you legally need to support accessibility in your app, but this is again a realm where I would add enough accessibility like what we just did so that the app works. And then there's more accessibility stuff that we can add as we actually build and grow the app. Below, again, I will put a link to some accessibility videos that I've put on YouTube. We've done the core things that I would say you should do definitely 100% in your app. But there is some other stuff like voiceover, which is also very important, but it takes a much longer time to add to your app. Baked into SwiftUI is going to be some native voiceover, but for sure, we're going to have a couple voiceover problems in our app that at some point in the future, if my app is successful, I would then go and address. Anyway, that's it for this video. Let's Option Command C. Let's make this a feature. We'll say iPad, accessibility, and dark mode. Stage it, commit it, push it up to GitHub, and now you guys should be ready to launch the first version of your app.